Have you ever looked in the mirror and felt this tension right here in your chest? It's that whisper that says you're living below the standard of the man that you were designed to be. Maybe you've built a career. Maybe you've built a home. Maybe you're actually doing everything that the world says that a man should do. And yet something feels misaligned. Like there's a deeper purpose that's calling you forward. A purpose that's buried under the noise of work, stress, expectations, and even silence. Welcome to the Sacred Gentleman Podcast. This isn't about becoming a better leader at work. It's about becoming the man God designed you to be from the beginning. And what that means is there's no more drifting, guys. There's no more hiding. There's no more living half alive. This is a new era, a new identity, and a new mission. And if you felt something stirring inside you as you listen to that, that's because you were made for more. You feel the call to be a man set apart for God, disciplined, refined, and ready to lead. This podcast will form that man in you. Welcome to the Sacred Gentleman. Men, we are going to go deeper than we ever have before. So before we get started, if and only if I earn these things, make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode. I want you to share this with at least one man who needs it, and make sure to leave a rating and review if you're listening to the audio. And if you're watching it on YouTube, make sure you ring that bell. Let me start out by telling you why this podcast exists. When I ended the Fire Forge Leader podcast, it wasn't because leadership stopped mattering to me, but it was because God was pulling me into something much, much deeper, into the very identity of manhood. Over the last decade, culture hasn't just confused men. It has actually attempted to erase the very blueprint of who God created men to be. The world has severed men from the divine order. And when you break God's order, you break the man, you break the home, you break society. But God's order hasn't changed. It's God at the top, man directly communing with God underneath, his wife partnered within his mission, and that man leading his family and ultimately influencing and leading the world. Not through dominance, not through suppression, not tyranny, but responsibility, stewardship. God created man to be the head, the protector, the provider, and the priest of his household. He designed woman to be that man's partner, equal in value, distinct in role, and absolutely essential to the mission. What it did was it told men to abandon their strength, to quiet their voice, to apologize for their masculinity. And when you remove a man from the position that God designed him for, he collapses inward. He drifts. He doubts. He becomes a ghost within his own home. The Sacred Gentleman podcast exists to restore what culture has tried to erase, to remind you that before you were born, that God etched a code onto your heart, a blueprint, if you will, a divine design for courage, for leadership, for sacrifice, for mission, and for love. Code that the world has tried to bury, code that many men have forgotten, a code that this podcast is going to help you to remember. We're here to help you reclaim biblical masculinity. Not this cartoon version of the world, not the cultural distortion, but the real masculinity. Masculinity that protects, masculinity that sacrifices, masculinity that leads with truth and loves with strength. This is not a podcast about becoming a nice guy. This is a podcast about becoming a necessary man, a sacred gentleman. Let's take a moment to define this archetype, this identity that we as men are stepping into together. A sacred gentleman isn't defined by his manners. He's defined by his mastery, by his moral clarity, by his mission. He is a man of order, God above him, his wife beside him, the world better because of him. He's a man who stands when the world bows. He speaks truth when the world silences men. He takes responsibility when others make excuses. This is the man who can go to war and yet come home to hold his wife with compassion and guide his children with tenderness. He is both the lion and the lamb. He's dangerous to darkness, but gentle with those he loves. He's the warrior who prays, the leader who listens, the protector who also serves, the king who only bows before the King of Kings. This is the man you are becoming. This is the sacred gentleman. Now let's talk about the battlefield that you men are standing on today. The enemy isn't your job. It's not your wife, and it's definitely not your kids. It's not your schedule either. The battlefield is right here inside the man. It's the spiritual war for your identity. Society tells men to shrink, to be passive, to be ashamed of their strength, to apologize for their authority. That's why men feel lost. That's why men feel disconnected, exhausted, directionless. When a man loses his place in God's divine order, he loses himself. And when that man loses himself, his family collapses and culture follows. This podcast is part of that antidote. This is where we reclaim ground that has been lost, where we redefine strength, where we redefine our identities and redefine manhood from that eternal biblical foundation. This is where men wake up again. Every episode of The Sacred Gentleman will form you, not entertain you. This isn't a jokes or a tips and tricks podcast. This is spiritual formation. This is soul work. This is rebuilding the man from the ground up. And we do it through 6 pillars of the sacred code. Sacred means to be set apart. Code, because there's actually a way to get there. First is sanctify the man. We need to return to God. We need to purify the mind, the body, and our soul. We need to become a man that God can trust again. The A stands for aligning with the call. This is where we hear God's voice so that we can understand our assignments and so that we can walk in obedience. The C is craft the vision. This is where we build clarity for your home, your marriage, your mission, and your life. The R is rebuild the temple. Strength, discipline, health, treating your body as a place of worship. E stands for engage in brotherhood. No more isolation, no more lone wolf lifestyle. We rise in the presence of other men. And finally, the D stands for deploy the legacy. This is talking about living with purpose, serving with conviction, building something that outlives the man. This is the journey of the sacred gentleman. So here's my invitation to you. If you've been drifting, if you've been living numb, if you feel like the world has pulled you away from who you were meant to be, this podcast, it's your wake-up call. You don't need more motivation. You need identity. You need order. You need to return to the design that God wrote on your heart. You were not meant to live small. You are meant to live sacred, set apart. Over the next coming weeks, we're going to walk together as brothers through marriage, through fatherhood, through being a disciple, discipline, leadership, faith, temptation, identity, and purpose. You're not alone anymore. You're part of something bigger, a movement, a reformation of masculinity. So here's what I want you to do. As I stated before, if I have earned it, I want you to give a rating and review to boost this up so more men can hear it. I want you to subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode. And you need to share this with at least one man who needs it. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to ring that bell. For you, I want you to write down the man that you want to become. And I want you to look through the lens of your faith, your marriage, leadership, and legacy. Pray to God and ask Him to reveal what part of your identity He wants to restore in you first. You're not here by accident. You're here because God is calling you back into that divine order, back into your purpose, back into your manhood. This is the beginning of a new chapter, a new identity, and a new mission for men across the world. The Fire Forge Leader podcast, it built the fire, but the sacred gentleman will build the brotherhood. I'm your host, Steve Baumgartner, and this is the movement that will reshape the hearts of men everywhere. Stand tall, stand firm, stand sacred. Now let's rise to what God has called us to.